morning, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Goyal. I'm conference chair of IIT 2020. And today, I am so privileged to have Ashish Chauhan, Bombay Stock Exchange with us. And we are going to talk about a lot of interesting things, but let's talk to him about his view, especially on the role of technology in civilization, which is a very interesting question. And we were talking and he has some really cool answers. So Ashish, I don't want to spend a lot of time out introducing you. Everybody knows you. You are Bombay Stock Exchange CEO, IIT Bombay alum. You're one of the most prolific speaker I know. You can talk about Bitcoin. You can talk about financial market, money. You could have be on any of the panel, but I thought fireside chat will be the best format to really learn and understand what is your view of the future and specific to the area you are in. So shall we start?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Sanjeev, for inviting me.
So Ashish, my first question is, what is your view on the role of technology in civilization?
Uh, it's a very interesting question because the technology is the only change that happens in the world. The society falls around it. So, for example, you can say the first technology which human actually mastered, not invented but mastered, was perhaps fire, right? Fire existed before mankind came into existence, but controlling it, starting it when you want, stopping it when you want, putting it in a small corner was a great technology. And that allowed the people who mastered it to, of course, have better food, don't fall ill because they don't get the bugs. But that was also used for protecting against animals, giving light in the night, and of course throwing at the enemies and subjugating them. So it was an offensive, it was a defensive technology, and so, but it took probably a few million years to spread across the world. And then, of course, the wheel and the metallurgy and so many other things came, but those things would take a long time and to spread across the world, and sometimes the world was not connected, so many parts of the world did not have that. But each technology actually started evolving on the shoulders of other technology, and that's how the technology waves started. Earlier they were slower waves, 1 lakh year, 2 lakh years, then they became 10,000 years. And India, in a way, was pioneering the first what I call first faster technology waves from say 10,000 BC to 2000 AD. India was in a way leading the world in developing newer technologies, which included cotton, metallurgy, even invention of the decimal system and so on and so forth. But later on, India kind of dropped out. Other people took India's technology or China's technology or other places, and that's how basically it started moving. And around 700-800 years back, a new framework came about which became very fast, and that's what we call industrial revolution. That newer and newer technologies which were built on earlier technologies, some of them were invented in India, and that's how basically the technology waves became faster, and India did not participate in that wave. So if you look back, say 500 years back, India accounted almost 30-33% of world GDP
No
because it
way.
was yeah, because it was the pioneer of the older technology. But when the Britishers came to India, uh, say probably 1650 to 1950, 300 years, India's GDP 1650 was probably 25% of world GDP. It's a JP Morgan statistics.
Numbers,
They
yeah.
extrapolated, and 1650 India was probably 25% of world GDP. When Britishers
Wow.
left, India's GDP became 2% of world GDP. Some of that Britishers squeezed out of
2%.
India.
So
Yeah,
from 33% to 2%.
yeah, in 400-500 years, and 300 years from 25 to 2%, and then uh, basically some of it was squeezed out of India by Britishers. Some people say they took away $45 trillion, but some of it happened because they increased their production so much.
Yeah.
We did not increase our production. We did not participate in that industrial revolution, and for me, that was the only reason why the Indian civilization went down, because it did not master the technology. It did not allow its own people to even learn new technology. We used to cut people's ears if they learned those Vedas and those
Yeah.
kind of things, right? So effectively, it was a very uneven society, very hierarchical. It wanted to keep the knowledge and wisdom and technology only to few. and so continue to maintain their hegemony over the people, the rest of the sort of society. But that ended up defeating the society, defeating the civilization, and that is where, for me, if you look back now, say 1,000 years, and then extrapolate for next 50 years, the technology waves which were coming slow are now becoming faster. And then what happened in last, say, 500 years is going to happen in next 50 years.
So I have a question here, Ashish. Even PM Modi yesterday talked about entrepreneurship. If I look back, and which is very fascinating, I find in India, even a chai wala or a vegetable guy, the guy who's selling street, he's a freaking entrepreneur. He knows how to buy enough. He has the cash. He pays even a lot of time, a lot of interest and all. So where did we miss? What we did wrong, and what can we correct today so India can really thrive?
In a way, we didn't do anything wrong. People are basically enterprising. People are resourceful, at least some of them, and they figure out ways to improve their lives using the social framework that is available to them, the legal framework, and of course the latest technology that is available to them. And that's where they continue to move from one space-time framework to another space-time framework. And that's where today, in my opinion, is pretty much the best time for India to move forward. Like last statement of mine in the earlier thing was that next 50 years will create more wealth than past 500 years. If total wealth of the world is $360 trillion today, in next 50 years it will become $720 trillion. I'm basically giving you an understanding. And India,
how many?
360 to 720. It's basically doubling. Current wealth is estimated at $360 trillion, right? So if you go to $720 trillion, and India,
but we have around $88 trillion total economy. So how does that translate?
What happens is the GDP is the production. Wealth, okay. It's like your house is a wealth. It produces nothing, right? So if you have $88 trillion or $90 trillion, so literally $4 is producing, $4 of wealth is producing $1 of output. It's called capital output ratio. So you have $4 of capital, $1 of output. So many times we confuse the wealth with the income. Right, so that's where the 90 trillion.
So that's where the problem comes. Are you an entrepreneur or are you an accountant?
And you can be both. In my opinion, you can be an entrepreneur and an accountant like me. But having said that, if we are going to create, the world is going to create $360 trillion of more wealth. In India, with almost 18-19% of world population, almost 20% of world young population or more.
So I have a question here, Ashish. I want to stop you for a sec. How is the wealth created? Because I thought the principle is just things change shape and form. We read in chemistry. How 360 becomes 720 is like we are by printing just more dollars or rupees, or I'm still confused because it baffles me, these numbers today.
No, it's again a very interesting question. I took this 360 to 720 just to give you an idea of the arithmetic part of it. But as you rightly asked, the wealth is a social concept, right? It's in collective mind. We call something wealth, but basically who is holding the resources of the society? Who has the claim over future resources of the society is the guy holding the wealth. And if you get new technology, if you have ability to produce new things or put a gun on somebody's head, his resources transfers to you. And that is how the society,
wealth is created.
The universe doesn't have a concept of wealth. It is even ants probably they might be having because they have queen and all. But usually in a society like human society, we create our own social concept of wealth, that you have a larger house, I have a smaller house, but your house is near to the highway and mine is against in some rural area, so your house is larger and so you have a larger wealth. So those are more what I call.
No, but Ashish, my question is very simple. I used to buy a loaf of bread for $1. And after 30 years, if I'm paying $10 for that, then the wealth is not really created. Because
it's just that your salary might have gone up. Or
yeah, but it's the same thing I can do with that. So I can't do more.
Yeah, so basically it's called terms of trade in economics, that who has more power to price his or her services or goods better than others. So today, the guys from time immemorial, people who knew better technology could price their services or their goods better than others. So technology is the only change that happens, and people with newer technology, like having guns, the Portuguese won against Indians. They didn't able to price anything. They had to just put the gun on people's head and take all the material and call it trade, right? And that's how basically the material transfers from India to Portugal or then later on to Britishers. For the basically the and similarly now China will do, and that's how I say that people who have ability to have newer technology, especially the offensive technologies, somehow seem to make more sense than in transfer of wealth than anything else, at least in history. But slowly, the entire technology is becoming democratizing. And for me,
so I wanted to stay with the same question before we switch that. So today, when we talk about wealth creation, and let's talk about geopolitical issues we are dealing with today. So our world, no matter what you and me say, is more connected than ever. And we are finding more connection. As you can see in my background, that's why I have all these connections, because it's almost impossible to find the connections with just a common arithmetic or common models. So we are finding nuances there. So how the current geopolitical situation is impacting this wealth creation or this money concept, because this concept was developed, I don't know, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. I'm not a history buff, you know that, from fire to now. So how that is working and how it is going to impact us as a human being, so we can start planning things. We have a lot of amazing audience. In fact, I will tell you, Ashish, there are audience are far more smarter than me. And so I want to give them the right value for their time. So if you can go a little bit deeper and just explain us this geopolitical and the money concept or wealth concept.
Basically, the geopolitics is something where the societies pitch against each other in terms of the control of resources and control of future resources. And that's what Britishers did to India. And so that was geopolitics in a way. They subjugated India and squeezed money and brains and stuff like that. And so India and China, in some ways, 500 years back when the Industrial Revolution started, in Japan also, they were left behind. Then Japan started emulating the rest of the world in 1850s. They had a Meiji Revolution. They exactly copied everything, including their dress. They started wearing the Western dress and playing baseball and stuff. And then they caught up at some point and they started attacking. And later on, they got defeated in World War II. And that's how now they are economic power, but not the military power, because they have been kept down. And now India and China kind of got left behind along, but they didn't come up. Post 1979, China started kind of moving up using the same technology which the other guys had. And now they think their time has come. They were subjugated, they were acting subjugated for last 40, 45 years to basically attract that new technology, new ways of doing things. In fact, money is also technology.
Right.
Fiat money is also new, as you rightly said. You keep on printing and make people feel they have become richer, but they are not, because $1 loaf becomes $10, so they are no longer richer, but they feel that. And so these technologies, they kind of started taking over, and now they are reasonably confident that not only defensive, offensive, but even the future technologies of artificial intelligence and all, they will be able to control so much that they don't no longer need the world. And for me, even the virus, especially if you can manufacture a new virus and put it into the rest of the world and kind of bring them down faster than what they were going in a comparative sense, then that is also a technology. Post World War II, atom bomb was the technology, right? Post 2020, the modification of virus for spreading illness might be another technology which only 5-6 countries will have and try to stop others from having, like what they did. And so I wrote an article in April 2020, immediately after this. This is the new.
Where can our audience find that article, Ashish?
You search for Ashish Chauhan and you will get the.
What is the title?
It's basically about COVID and the new geopolitics. And so basically for me, the China, of course, it's also taking India as a great opponent, which it was for time immemorial. Only in last 300-400 years, both stood behind. and now they are almost 3-4 times larger in terms of their GDP. They want to keep India down, so they are also using Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka to encircle India, and also they have so much money to throw everywhere, so that's what they are doing. And any power which is in a sense wanting to control, which India was never, because India was a landlocked place where the top was Himalayas and bottom was sea, so it did not attack outside broadly over the
Invaders.
last 2-3 thousand years, and so it doesn't have that attitude as a society to go out and attack. But China has tried, and they have been successful 600 years back, and so on and so forth. That's where basically the China will continue to try that. Only thing is they are trying to now separate themselves away from rest of the world because they think they don't need the world. Well, as India.
So I kind of have a challenge here, Ashish, and I get your point, but let's talk a little bit about the geopolitical situation as such today. The land, which was a big thing in 100 years ago, today that concept of land has changed dramatically. Yeah, we can fight over what we have, and I'm not asking anybody or India or anybody to leave it, but the boundaries have shrinked. Our world is far more connected than it used to be. Look at us. We are able to do this summit in the history of IIT first time. We had 14,000 people simultaneously logged in yesterday. That wasn't possible earlier. In 30 years, it's a game changer. The point I'm trying to make it is we are so connected, but we still act as it doesn't matter to us if something happens to this or something happens to this. Anything happen to India, anything happen to somebody in your neighborhood, it is going to impact us. It definitely has a huge impact. So when we will start thinking of concept where we can co-develop solutions or really think through, because it's all digital now. It's not physical. The world has completely changed. And we are still fighting and still going over these physical instead of thinking about how we govern in this digital world. So the big conversation on my impact series I had with few people is, how are we going to govern people in new world? Because they don't understand, and I'm sorry, they don't understand the concept of privacy. They don't understand what kind of images on the computer is okay, or what kind of surveillance is okay, what information is correct. Even GDPR in Europe, great initiative, but I don't think it truly protect the citizens of that country. It seems little like a standard like ISO we have. Sorry, I should not say that. There are a lot of people from Europe here. So we need to think of a different kind of a structure where geopolitical situation and the governance has to be far more thought through. So in 2050, I bet this is not going to be a thing. We will not be even fighting on a piece of land because nobody even care about land. It's all digital.
No, in a way, you are right. And these are the questions that were asked even in post-World War II. How to create newer future in the light of newer realities of atom bomb and other resources, right? And that's how the UN came. That's how the WTO came. That's how UNCTAD came. That's how the NATO came. And that has given some results over last 70 years, right? But the world is not static. It has already moved. And now UN is pretty much irrelevant. The World Bank is hugely irrelevant because ultimately what are the resources? $300 billion, China gives it to people in a year, right? So all those situations which evolved and developed, and they were also developed for the leader at that point in time. They started working for America. Similarly, now, and of course, there used to be a bipolar world, America and Russia. Russia used to project a larger image. Now, China is projecting larger image. The concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is, let's work together. Indians are fools to do that in a way because we think everyone else will agree with us. They will agree with us on the surface, but they will go and try to subjugate anyway. You will not do that because you believe in your own Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. They don't, and so finally you get subjugated. They don't, right? And that's what you need to worry about. That ultimately these are all nice little stuff, but till the time mankind is there, it is physical. We are not logical unless our brains go into the net and then we become sort of all artificial beings. Then that will be a different world. It may happen
like almost like Transcendence movie.
Yeah, so 2040, 2050, it may happen. I don't know what finally happens, but till the time we remain physical, there's going to be physicality to life. At the same time, in next 50 years, large portion, almost 70, 80, 90% of the wealth will become logical, dematerialized,
Right,
right? And
exactly.
that will
That's
lead
what my
to,
point is. We are fighting on something which is going to be a losing proposition for everyone.
no, but imagine uh, you have a way to modify the DNA
Yeah.
to make you live 1,000 years.
By the way, we have a panel on that, Naveen Jain, and we have three people talking about that only.
Right? And so if you have a DNA, I mean, if you have a technology to change the DNA to live for 1,000 years, who will take it or who will get it? It's the guy who can put a gun on your head or give you a lot of money, right? And even if he gives you a lot of money, one side, other guys puts gun on your head, who will he give it to? The guy who puts gun on your head, because you will die after that, money has no relevance, right? And so effectively, it's still going to be the guys who can subjugate you physically. Of course, logically also you can be
Interesting point. Interesting point. I never thought about that. Okay, I got your point. Okay,
right.
you
And
have
so
everything in digital, but if you are not alive, who cares?
right, and so that's where for me it's very important till the time the mankind is there and they have the needs which are physical, the need for food, need for and their brains continue to work in a very selfish way. You cannot wish away. So only Indians have developed this because they were having what I call abundance of sunlight, abundance of food, abundance of everything for time immemorial. So they didn't have to go out and attack somebody, right? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
that the rest of the world didn't think that way because they have too much cold. They have to come to hot places, take away your spices and take it back, and of course take you also to work for them, right? And that's how these things happen.
Yeah, but Ashish, I kind of agree with you, but I felt that it is not the complete truth. So look at almost 50,000 of us in America. We have 50,000 plus IITians. That's the number given to me. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I'll take that number. And America has, I will say, given us opportunity. This become our karma bhumi. People have accepted us just the way we are. Of course, there were initially a lot of challenges. In fact, the people, Naren Gupta, Vinod Khosla, all these good friends of ours, they worked really hard, doubly hard than all of us. When I came in, IIT was a brand. There was no brand before them, and they really struggled. So I give them a lot of credit for what they have done. Naren took his company public in 80s, Vinod Khosla in late 80s too, and 90s, Sun Microsystem, and all phenomenal work all of them has done. So it's not that Vasudev Kutumbakam. I still believe, Ashish, there is some substance to that. It's just we have taken it too far. It's like, we completely forgot that there is, like, as one of my friends jokingly says, is, okay, you are walking towards a wall. You're going to hit a wall. God gave you a brain too. God is not going to save you. So I understand that sometimes we completely go beyond the normal. But anyway, that's a philosophical conversation. So I wanted to make sure our audience gets the best value of their time, because it's not about you and me, it's about our audience. I wanted to make sure. So next question I have for you is, what is different now in technology paradigm? Specifically, India has changed a lot in last 25 years. Or I will say, in last 20 years, there is a dramatic change. The company like TCS and all used to be they were good, but very small, considering today. In 20 years, they have completely changed the whole infrastructure and the whole landscape of India. But I'm still not seeing a lot. Yes, there are 30 unicorns from India. Is it really happening? And what do you think where India is today? And I don't know if you can say it off the record or not, on the record or not.
No, no. I mean, I would say, in a way, just to take on that Vasudeva Kutumbakam, it's a great idea, but everyone has to agree. Then only that's an idea, right? And so when, as and when everyone agrees, come to me. Till the time, we have to also copy those guys and their behavior and stuff like that, right? So that's how I would put it. In terms of the context of where this thing's coming from and where India is today, the concept of capitalism came post what I call industrial revolution started, and around 1850, 1860s and those days, there were two people, Karl Marx and Engel, both were friends in London, and they saw tremendous amount of poverty, slums, and those people who had kind of moved away from feudalism of the very difficult life in the farms of UK. They had come to the London, city of London, and they saw that poverty and the capital, people who had a lot of money were exploiting their labor. And that is what is the capitalism is all about. Capitalism required too much of money to be put in to produce some more money at the cost of the labor. That's what the concept they created. It was good for the observations they made. It was good for the society. But then society evolved further. The technology came even faster. And today, in first time of human history, that if you need to produce a lot, you don't have to put in a lot. So what I call a concept of capitalism without capital. To
Interesting.
basically to bring down the point, Mark Zuckerberg was not born into the wealth. He didn't have to borrow $1 billion to start his company. He probably took 100,000, 200,000 from his professors and other people and started. And now he's worth whatever $100 billion or $50 billion, right? And that is true with Larry Page. That's true with Elon Musk. I've been told now he's the second richest person in the world. And of course, that is true with Nandan Nilekani, who is also from IIT Bombay, and Narayan Murthy, who is from IIT Kanpur, and things like that, right? So for me, that capitalism without capital, creating wealth without putting a lot of money is somewhere now much more possible than ever before. And India, when I grew up, there was very little capital. Only 10 families had capital, and the rest of the India, pretty much 100% India had no capital, right? So we had no ambition, we had no exposure. And then this technology of IT, technology of various types, biotech, everything came in. And now we are able to create wealth out of our brains. Earlier, if you had to have wealth, either your forefathers had wealth or you had committed a great sin in India, right? These were the only two ways in which you could create wealth. Now you can create wealth legitimately, legally, ethically, using your brains, because you don't require a lot of capital, which nobody gave you. Because putting capital is a leap of faith. After 5 years, it may go away. And today, because you require less capital, that's what I call it, capitalism without capital, that you require less capital, but you can create huge capital. And that's where India today, who creates the wealth, new wealth? The people who learn new technology, right? Who can learn new technology? Youngsters. A person like me at 55 won't be able to learn new technology as much as a guy with 20-year, guy who is 20-year-old. And that's where...
Don't say that, Ashish. You runs the fastest exchange on planet. So let's not go there.
These youngsters who are listening will do even better. I mean, I have no doubt about it in my mind. And that's where, for me, the next revolution, that next 50 years, will create $360 trillion of wealth. Most of it, almost 80-90% will be created by the youngsters.
Yeah.
What we need to do as a society is to make them learn newer things and unlearn older things. The waves are coming so fast. It's like a tsunami, right? One wave after another, they become larger and larger. And if you ride a wave by accident, like I am a mechanical engineer, but I rode wave of technology and finance, and I have become reasonably rich from where I come from, a tin bag to Bombay. Now, I mean, I'm reasonably okay. And that's where because I came onto that technology wave by accident, by getting into IIT and IIM and so on and so forth. And that's where I see that if we can train our youngsters, not only IITians, but the rest of the country, that learn newer things, unlearn older things faster and faster, and try to ride the waves, then that 50 years, when we create, the mankind creates $360 trillion of wealth, 25% of India creates, which is possible because 20% youngsters of the world, which are all technology savvy today. India has like ubiquitous 4G, everyone is going on their mobile, everything. Basically, India is ideally placed compared to many other societies which are becoming old, like China is old, Japan is old, Europe is old, America is old, other than IITians. And that's where, for me, India has a great time to create those new technologies, create that great wealth, or transfer those guys' wealth into you, and don't get subjugated. And that's where you now don't require capital. You use your brains, learn a lot of things. You have 4G in your hand, you have mobile in your hand, through which you can learn anything. You can become eklavya.
So Ashish, that's an interesting question, and I have asked a lot of people in the past 3 months, because I was asked to be chair of this conference. with, hey, do something. And what do you stand for? So I said, I stand for only two things. I truly believe innovation and entrepreneurship, these are the only two ways we can make and we can create a better world. America is a living example. And I believe in American spirit. I still believe in American dream. Not still, I believe in American dream. No matter whatever rest of the world says, this is the place even today going to create phenomenal technology, because it's a very different society. So entrepreneurships, people worship entrepreneurship here. People worship entrepreneurs. And they are ready to co-invent and collaborate to build bigger and better systems, softwares, organization, all of that. So the question is how an entrepreneur in India can get to that level, because in India, we don't reward failures. We are so conservative about the failures. It's like, so if you fail, you are good for nothing. Your life is over. In US, we celebrate failure. Oh, damn it. Oh, this guy, you know what? We gave him $10 million, but he's better now. Let's give him 100 this time.
No, India is changing. I mean, I have been an entrepreneur. I have failed many times. And still I am here, you know where, right? So for me, India never did that. It's just that we did not have money. We did not have capital to put in. So you could not buy lottery
Access
tickets.
was not there.
Right?
So
you could not buy more lottery tickets because you did not have money to eat.
I got
Now,
it.
the lottery ticket has become cheaper. So even you and me can buy those lottery tickets, right? And that's why many times when we see some wealthy economy or wealthy society, we think they are heavens and we are hell. For me, we are a poor society, but we are not behind. Today, India's financial sector is far more automated than America's financial sector is. We have leapfrogged. India's
True,
mobile
that's
technology is far better than American. And you might be paying $60 a month for mobile bill. We are paying $2.
Yeah.
Right? And so you may have great infrastructure and so on and so forth, but for me, we have in the concept which is the modern wealth will come out of the dematerialized activities. That is the activities of mind and bits and bytes. India today is far ahead of America. That doesn't mean.
So let's talk about it a little bit, Ashish. I wanted to give some really objective ideas to our audience. So you have studied India market extremely well. You have how many companies listed on your exchange now?
We have around 5,000 companies. Yeah.
5,000 companies listed. And there is what is the total net worth of those companies?
Their market capitalization is around $2.3 trillion.
So that's a very large number. $2.3 trillion is a lot of money. Now, where do you see opportunities for our youngsters? And the reason I'm asking this question is I asked similar question from the FedEx CEO. So I talked to e-cells and IITs. I don't know if you are aware or not. All the major IITs have entrepreneurship cells. And Ashish, I can't even tell you, these kids are phenomenal. They're so good, it's unbelievable. And they ask me this one question, all of them. Is Sanjeev, tell us where are the opportunities. I say, hey, opportunity is about the problem. I can tell you a lot of problems, but let me ask my friend Ashish Chauhan, because he has more problems than me. So what problems can our team solve, or can our LM solve?
See, do you want to solve the problems of the world, or you want to be rich? In a way, they are connected, but in a way, they are also slightly separate. So if you want to be solving the world's problem, then it's a different world, right? Then you don't, you may become rich. That doesn't mean you don't become rich, right? By solving world's problem, you do become rich. And Elon Musk is a good example, or Nandan is a good example, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, if you want to become, and if you are wanting to become rich and then solve world's problem, that is what Sridhar Vembu is doing. First, he became rich by Zoho, and now he is trying to say, don't go to America, stay here, right? And I will stay
in the village.
to make money.
Unbelievable model by the Zoho model. I'm so amazed. I know their chief innovation officer. He's also IIT. Phenomenal model. So 10th grade kids they are hiring.
Right. So for me, it's important to understand that if you want to become rich, you have to basically create your technology with people who can give you maximum profit.
Ashish, I really want you to give the right answer. You know,
I'm giving you the right answer. And that's why
Give me the opportunity. I want to build the company. We have Hungary,
Yes.
123,000 IITians in 23 IITs. I want to give them problem. If they solve it, I will find money for that. Give them real problem.
Yes. So the problem is that America and Europe have the per capita income of $50,000 without doing much, and we have per capita income of $2,000 per year with doing a lot of hard work. So there is a great arbitrage opportunity.
Okay.
Teach their kids mathematics, which they pay $200 per hour. Do it in $50, and you will be. So for me, go where money is, solve their problems, and make money, and then solve your problems. But if you say no, I will solve my problems, that is another way to do it,
Yeah.
which is what is called CSR or social responsibility, right? So I can be very good and say first you solve India's problem. Anyway, there are millions. I mean, it's not that everyone will try to or everyone will be successful in getting the arbitrage money. That's what Nandan did, or Narayan Murthy did, or Wipro did, or I mean, the labor, IT labor is so costly. You do it in India. That's how you do BPO and so on and so forth, right? And that's where, for me, solve their problems. You will get money, then solve your problems. But if you want to solve your own problems, that is also true. Flipkart has done it. There are literally many examples, like Zerodha is one of our brokers, a school dropout, guy called Nitin Kamath. And he is now probably worth a few $1 billion, if not more, by giving zero cost brokerage houses. I mean, brokerage house 10 years back. Now you hear Robinhood in America and you think it's a good idea to do it. This guy did 10 years back, right?
Wow.
And so on. Now he's worth.
What's the name of the company?
Zerodha, Zerodha, Zero Dha.
Nice.
He's from Bangalore. Basically, it means zero brokerage. Okay, the company name
Wow.
is Zero Brokerage, right? And so effectively,
So how did you do it? Help me understand, because some of these model I don't get it, and I think our audience will get some ideas with that.
yeah, for me it will take some longish time to explain. We can also call him to explain. He's a nice guy, young boy, and so in a way, for me, there are a lot of people solving India's problems. There are a lot of problems solving people solving America's, China's, everyone's problems. Go and solve the problems. There are 2-3 more interesting things which I can tell you today. After 25 years of hard work, India is now exporting around $200 to $250 billion of IT BPO kind of services. Now, as you rightly said, today world has become small, right? We have all become connected, as you rightly said. Can we increase that $250 billion to $2 trillion in next 10 years? Now you have a head start, right? You've already gone there. Can you do that? That will be a great service to the world and great service to the nation. So $250 billion to $2 trillion, so beautiful an opportunity, right? And everyone is welcome. From teaching children mathematics to teaching children classical music, or becoming a secretary to a person sitting in America who is himself a secretary of somebody, but he wants to have a secretary, we can have in Hyderabad, right? So everyone wants somebody, understand, right? So for me, can we go from $250 billion to $2 trillion and make it a little more democratic than only large companies? Can any individual become a secretary of somebody, some secretary or some driver somewhere? And that is for me a great opportunity, $250 billion to $2 trillion. Second opportunity is the healthcare. America with $5 trillion, I mean $25 trillion of GDP is spending $5 trillion, 20% only on healthcare. And their outcomes are extremely bad compared to even India. India is 1/4 their size. India's total GDP is $3 trillion. America is spending $5 trillion for 1/4 of people only on healthcare. And that $5 trillion as compared to $25 trillion, that's 20% of America's GDP, is going to actually increase. It might become 30, 40% going forward. Like what we did in late 90s and early 2000, reduce their cost of IT by sending cheaper labor and then bringing the work into India. Can we have healthcare being provided by Indians in their languages, in Japanese, in Chinese, in sort of Southern American language, or in Europe, in different French and all? Then you might be able to bring back $2 trillion additional into India. Our what I call unskilled labor is sending $90 billion from Gulf into India. You know that?
No,
if you had sent skilled labor, the healthcare guys, right, where everyone is spending money and it's burgeoning. In fact, one of the largest states in Canada told me, I mean, I teach there in Canada, and the minister told me that, boss, 70-80% of the current total spend is on healthcare of that state. He said we are going to go bankrupt soon. And that is going to be true for America, Europe, everyone who give free healthcare to everyone. Or in some ways, it just balloons. And for me, Indians are rightly so. You get $2 trillion of IT, $2 trillion of healthcare in next 10, 15 years. You made it, because then on top of that, you keep on doing stuff, and whatever you do for those guys, you can do for your own people, right? Much cheaper, like what we did in 4G. What you pay for $60 for a bad service, we actually get good service for $2, right? In remotest part of India. And I have gone from Chandigarh to Simla, and I was watching TV on my laptop, right? Cricket match. That is the kind of infrastructure that has been built, and that's where India, being a frugal technology leader in the world, it will be, whether we like it or not, whether you and me work for it or not, India's time has come. Okay, and India has
India
to ensure,
is rising.
Yeah, and as you rightly said, you have firm belief in American dream, that it happens only in America.
I won't say that, Ashish. What I really meant is for every other country, not just India, because I live in America, so I understand how things works here and what works here. And I'm a firm believer this place and this society is phenomenal when it comes to innovation. Here, the investment they made is unbelievable. So we can have that conversation maybe some other time. We have only a few minutes. So before I close, do you have any parting thoughts for our audience?
So that's what I was saying, that as much as you have sort of American dream with you, I have an Indian dream with me. That if Narendra Modi, where he came from, could become Prime Minister, and if Ashish Chauhan, where he came from, and become CEO of BSE, with human endeavor, intelligence, hard work, sincerity, and technology, India will make it. India's time has come, and India and US, by quirk of fate, have gotten together. 70 years of our independence, we were on wrong side of history. Now we are having basically friends which are on the right side of history. We work with them, and we give them something. In return, we get something. It'll be what I call a complementary life. We will prosper, they will prosper, and that's how I think India's century is just going to happen in next 50, 70 years. Thank you.
I have no doubt, Ashish, about it. And to me, India and US, India is my Janmabhoomi and US is my Karmabhoomi. Both are equally important. And I'm here, and my job as a conference chair and as an IITian is to foster innovation and entrepreneurship in both countries. Whatever I can do, whether I have to work with policymakers, investors, I am available for that. And that is the big reason I agreed to be the chair of this summit. So I can tell the world 500,000 IITians are open for collaboration, because we need a global scale systems, not just focused to one country or not just focused to one area. Is that I heard it several times that think local, act global and all that. It doesn't work in today's society, and we have plethora of solutions available, technology available, as you said. Amazon, Google, IBM, major company, Microsoft has built fantastic systems which we can leverage and create phenomenal opportunities. I see it every day. A high school kid like your son can build a company or product like Facebook in days nowadays because the infrastructure is all there. So you are absolutely right. All it requires is imagination and guts to do it. Do you agree with that?
And some exposure from the guys who are sitting in what I call rich economy. Help our guys sitting in India, and you will be rich, and our guys will be rich, right? Thank you.
We are here. Ashish, I had so much fun. I have a lot of more questions. I hope we can invite you back again. But thank you very, very much for your time. This was phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please have a wonderful day. And for our audience, please use hashtag IIT2020 and follow us. Check Ashish out, check his articles out, and go and see other sessions, especially Unconference. We have longest lasting Unconference, 36 hours long. And yes, every single session is full. Ashish, we have session full, even after closing of today. 500 people. I haven't seen this kind of traction and hunger in my life for knowledge. So yes, we are onto something really cool, and I agree with you. I'm here, and I'll support every single person who wants to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.